Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense. Talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the state Republican Party, as well as the chair of the county Republican Party out in Suffolk County. Jesse, good to do the show again with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to see you or be with you and with all our listeners. Well,
there's a lot going on, and we're going to have a very special guest. We're going to have John Mcglocklin, who's one of the nation's great pollsters, coming on our second segment, and we can talk to him about a lot of issues. But let me tell you what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the president's speech that he gave, and I want to get your take on it, my view of it, and I'm, as I always say, that's my official disclaimer, I'm the House Democrat, and I was just shocked, disappointed, saddened, and in many ways outraged by that speech. What Biden essentially did is he said half the country, 75 million voters who supported Trump, which included people who were Democrats or independents, who were not far-right Republicans who supported Trump against Biden, that if you don't buy into his left-wing agenda that's foisted upon him and this country by a 50-50 majority in the Senate with the tiebreak of the Vice President of the United States, there's no mandate for their agenda. But if you don't go along with that agenda, that somehow you're an insurrectionist, you're a threat to this great republic. And instead of being a unifier, this president's made himself to be the divider-in-chief. And I'm a student of history, as you are. I have never heard a worse speech from a president, a more divisive speech in my lifetime. What say you, Jesse?
I completely agree. It was one of the most divisive speeches I have ever heard, historically, or presently. I remember when during his inauguration, President Joe Biden, said that back on January 20th of 2021, that he was going to bring people together, uniting our people and uniting our nation. And he asked every American to join him in his cause. And from almost day one of that, he's been dividing this country along philosophical schisms. And, Ronald Reagan has been known and regarded as a great communicator. And what happened that night in Philadelphia, where, freedom rang for the first time in a democracy. Biden has set the tone and epitaph as being the great divider. It's unbelievable that he would do this. And you know what, Judge? It's not just, he's not calling out just Republicans or MAGA Republicans or moderate Republicans. He's calling out all Republicans, but he's calling every one of those 75 million voters who cast a ballot for Donald Trump in 2020 and all those before him. The Democrats are they're saying that they're part of the problem and that they are a threat to democracy if they don't get in line and in step with his views and his policies. That's wrong, because those are truck drivers, those are cops, those are nurses, those are teachers, those are people from all walks of life. That's blue collar America out that he's calling out. And you know what? The Democrats continuously make the same problem. In 2016, Hillary Clinton called the Americans who supported change and Donald Trump deplorables. Now, he calls them extremists and elitists and those who threaten democracy. Remember, I don't think we should be surprised, Your Honor. This is the same president whose Department of Justice called average parents that had questions and went before school boards to question curriculums for their kids. He wanted to have them. He wanted to term them domestic terrorists. So this is nothing new. It's something that we've seen. We've never seen it so blatant. And I mean, even with the mainstream media, the liberal mainstream media like CNN calling out the president on his speeches, that sent the liberal wing of the parties in this country into a tizzy because they're being called out for being what they are. They are the divisive force. Every time there's been a problem in the last 5 or 6 years, 8 years almost, they've always used the Republican or a Republican Party or a Republican voter or the average voter that does not agree with them as the source of consternation and the source of divisiveness. They are the great dividers.
Well, it's very interesting because, again, I'm the House Democrat, but I'm a centrist Democrat. I'm a moderate Democrat. And there are a lot of things that Trump stood for and fought for and accomplished I thought were great accomplishments and great public policy stances. So, for example, this morning I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting with the Attorney General of Virginia, who, like you, is a Cuban-American, Jason Mayeras, and he won in Virginia with Youngkin, who's the governor, as well as lieutenant governor, another Republican. And one of the reasons they won, Jesse, was because of the attempt by the Democrats controlling the Justice Department to say that if parents objected to critical race theory indoctrination by the schools, and if they spoke up at school boards against that kind of policy, they want their kids to be taught the basics, to read, to write, to speak properly, to do arithmetic, not to be indoctrinated about sexual identity or racial identity or divisive politics or rewriting of history, which is a distortion of the American history and a misunderstanding of our Declaration of Independence and our constitutional democracy and republic. So they won. They won because they fought against it. So there are a lot of people who deeply resent that kind of politics, that kind of divisiveness. And I, as a Democrat, will tell you I'm against it. It's absolutely awful. The price we're going to pay as a country for this divisiveness is going to go on for years and years and years to come. Somebody has to step back and say, respect the other side's opinion. Just because you disagree on something doesn't make you an evil person. They've been saying on MSNBC, they've had the broadcasters, the news people, so-called journalists, saying that the Republican Party and the people who support Trump are evil. Can you imagine saying that another human being is evil because of their political views?
I can't. And unfortunately, the mainstream media lets these individuals get away with it. It is wrong. If there is ever going to be a reason for a civil war, and I hope and I pray that, and I know that there will never be one here in this country again, that it's this type of rhetoric that fuels it. You can blame, and the Democrats are the ones that get away with it. What about when we speak about it was Democratic senators and Democratic members of Congress and even the mainstream media were saying during the Trump administration, go up. I think it was Waters that used to say, if you see a Trump appointee, go up there and harass them. Make them feel uncomfortable. We had the president, when he did not agree with the decision of the Supreme Court, he said that protests, violent or otherwise, in front of the justices' homes of the Supreme Court, that's allowable. He allowed that to happen, even though, as you pointed out, in our U.S. code, it's against the law. They will stoke fear-mongering, violence. They'll use this woke attitude that they've embraced and advanced to their benefits for the purposes of just holding on to control and winning elections or trying to win elections instead of actually governing and doing what their oath of offices are, which are to service all the people of the United States.
If this president had given a speech in which he said political violence is totally unacceptable, whether it comes from the far left or the far right, he would have been making a major step forward in being a unifier. If he had said that the Antifa riots and the Black Lives Matter riots during 2020 were totally unacceptable, he would have taken a step forward. All he talks about is January 6th. Now, let's be clear about what happened on January 6th. January 6th, a bunch of idiots went crazy and did stupid stuff. They did not represent the voice of the people in the Republican Party or anybody else who voted for Trump. They represented a very fringe element. And they kept saying that people died. The only person who died was someone who was shot by an unidentified Capitol police officer, and the woman was not armed, and they shot her dead. And if that happened in any other context, you'd have rioting in the streets by the Antifa crowd and a Black Lives Matter crowd. But the fact of the matter, they killed a protester. They had no reason to shoot that woman. There was no warning to her. They could have handled it differently. That was the only death attendant with that. And just because people trespassed, does not make you an insurrectionist. It makes you a trespasser. An insurrectionist is one who's using armed force to try to get their way. And if you happen to be walking around the Capitol Rotunda as part of the group, by the way, a lot of them were invited in by the Capitol Police. They waved them in, by the way. So at best, you have an argument for trespassing. At the very least, you have a defense. These people are not all insurrectionists. Only a handful of people were going crazy. And I'm telling you that we got to get back to the center. We have to get back to common sense. We have to get back to civility and respect for the other side. And these are dangerous times, and the President of the United States should not be playing this card just to win a midterm election. Let me switch topics with you, Jesse. I want to get your thoughts on the, I think, likelihood that the Justice Department is going to have to make a decision very shortly about whether to indict the former President of the United States, Donald Trump, with respect to the document retention problem he had at his Mar-a-Lago estate. What do you think about that situation?
Well, maybe you can educate us. Why do they have to make a decision right away? I have read some interesting, some news reports that they're going to wait after election. Is there a timeline that's set up here, or is
no?
Okay, so there's no timeline. But it has been regarded that there's a possible indictment. I believe that for the betterment of the country, the betterment of the institution as it is the Justice Department, the institutions of the three branches of government, that we truly do need a special prosecutor or a special master to review this case. It is politically sensitive. It's fraught with possible national security issues. It's fraught with confidentiality issues and executive power issues and executive power and privilege issues.
Right.
Honestly, and the partisanship here, the way it was undertaken, set this investigation, if it's right or just or not, it set it off on a bad foot. And it really does need someone that's independent, an independent entity, to take a look at what was reviewed, what was taken from from Mar-a-Lago, and the processes as to what led to that, and whatever future type of suggestion should come forward. That's what we need, a truly independent prosecutor or special master, whatever the term is right now, to truly give the American people confidence that the politics is being taken out of the Department of Justice.
Okay, let me clarify the issues for our audience.
Mm-hmm.
The appointment of a special master is to review the documents. The fact of the matter is, better practice would have been, and we had Professor Alan Dershowitz of Harvard on Catch the Night the other night on Tuesday, and Alan and I talked about this. The better practice is, and it's a standard practice, is at the very beginning of the process is to issue, make a request to the court for a special master and separate out the people who get the documents to review them from the people investigating a potential crime. And the Trump lawyers, frankly, were asleep at the switch, because if the Justice Department itself didn't ask for the appointment of a special master, they should have run in there quicker. 2 weeks was too slow going, because by that time, documents had been seized. As Alan Dershowitz said, it was more like a general warrant. They swept up hundreds of documents that they had no right to take. And the information was communicated by the sweeper of the documents to the investigative team. So now the fact of the matter is it's really been tainted. And that's a problem. Okay? Next, if I were Judge Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, he's in a real quagmire here. He has a real problem. I would be requesting and making the appointment of a special prosecutor for this case, a special counsel to investigate it. His people have to step back. They have tainted this process. And by the way, I believe that there's a real question, even if they did indict Trump legally, because of the taint involving lots of these documents, that the indictment could be dismissed on the tainted evidence rule. So that's one thing. Number two, and this is much more important than just a lawyer's debate. The Justice Department has to be very, very careful because they have discretion about whether to present and request an indictment. And given the divisiveness that you and I have talked about throughout the time you and I have been doing the Long Island Report together, and in this earlier part of this segment, the fact of the matter is we're on very, very dangerous ground here. And the people believe that the Justice Department is not fair, it's not honest, it's not doing the right thing, it's politically motivated, and that goes over to the highest levels of the FBI as well. I'm not talking about the good men and women of the FBI, the troops. I'm talking about the guys in Washington, the women in Washington who control the political chessboard for the FBI, and their biases are obvious. They've been obvious from the very, very beginning when they went after Trump on the false collusion narrative and the way they handled the Clinton issues, both the dossier as well as her emails, where she got a pass on everything. And if you're going to go after Donald Trump on destruction or mishandling of confidential top secret information, then how come Hillary Clinton got a pass? And by the way, I am not suggesting that Hillary Clinton should have been prosecuted. I am not suggesting she's guilty of a crime. I am suggesting that there's a double standard and it's obvious, and half the country can see it. And it's not just so-called MAGA Republicans who see it. It's people like me who's a moderate, common-sense, centrist Democrat who sees a double standard, and I'm outraged by it. They shouldn't be doing that. And by the way, to make a final point before we go into the break, Barack Obama still is holding documents. Jesse, we have to take a break. When we come back, we have one of the best pollsters in the country, John McGlocklin. I'm going to get his thoughts on these issues. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We're taking a short break. We'll be back in a minute with John McGlocklin.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Woo!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia. Jesse's the vice chair of the state Republican Party, as well as the county chair of the Republican Party out in Suffolk County. We're very fortunate indeed to have America's number one pollster on the show with us now, John McGlocklin, who has a keen insight, not just on the technical issue of polling, but the pulse of America and what really counts. Welcome aboard, John.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So Jesse and I want to talk to you. We were talking at the beginning of the show, and I want to get your feeling on Biden's speech to begin with that. I want to get your thoughts about what you think that means to America and to the politics of America.
Well, I thought it was blatantly political. I tell you, the major surprise was that the networks which were going to broadcast it decided not to broadcast it. And as a Republican, you know, Chairman Garcia and myself will tell you, we often think that the networks are pretty biased in favor of Joe Biden and not friendly to Republicans, the major, you know, mainstream networks. But for them not to broadcast it, they were doing Biden a favor, because in that speech, it was mean-spirited, it was nasty, it was overtly political, and it hasn't served them well, because we did a national survey right before that where Biden's disapproval had actually gone down a little. In July, it was at 60% disapprove. It dropped in our August 24th poll to 55%. But since then, I've seen other media polls that I respect where it's back up. And the generic ballot went from, we had the Republicans up 5 in July, but in August, it was 45-45, And now it seems to be the Republicans are going back up because the country's on the wrong track. 67% saying the country's on the wrong track. It's inflation, it's crime, it's the border. And Joe Biden didn't address any of those problems. It was a blatantly political attack on anybody that ever supported Donald Trump and as a Republican. And it was really mean-spirited in tone, and it didn't serve the country well at all at bad times. So, if that's a prelude to the fall campaign, the final 2 months, that's good for the Republicans because Joe Biden will drive our vote out, and he's not solving the problems that are going to cost the Democrats the election.
Well, as a Democrat, I will tell you, I'm outraged by that speech. I thought it was absolutely an awful speech. It was divisive. It's not what the country needs. The country needs a unifier in chief, not a divider in chief. Biden looked awful. The staging of that was out of the movie V for Vendetta, with the red and the military backing there. And the threats, they call, I have to tell you something. I think, and you and I have talked about this before, I think Donald Trump, in many ways, has an unfortunate personality. I think he alienates people. Right. But I will also tell you, I think he was an excellent president on a lot of issues that are important, whether it was the economy, whether it's security of the border, whether it was national security, whether it was the Iran deal, whether it was a recognition that China is an existential threat against us. This is a man who understood the importance of us being energy independent and militarily prepared and trying to do the right thing for the American people, whether you liked him or not. And so you take a guy like me who tries to be objective on these issues, and you're saying just because I don't like having critical race theory shoved down the throats of my children or grandchildren, somehow that makes me a fascist or a semi-fascist. I think that's just awful. It's demagogic. It's Orwellian. And if anybody's been pushing the fascist authoritarian model, it hasn't been the Republicans. It's been the Democratic Party. What say you, John?
Well, I tell you, Judge, you and John Katzimatidis often describe yourself as a common sense Democrat. And I know that Chairman Garcia and myself, being New York Republican, the only way we win elections is by getting Democrats to reject their party on their failures when they fail and switching to vote Republican. And that was the formula for George Pataki beating Mario Cuomo. That was the formula for Al D'Amato when he got elected to the U.S. Senate for New York. That was the formula for Lee Zeldin winning in Suffolk when he was the congressman. And that's the formula this year that Lee Zeldin's running on to become the next governor and beat Kathy Hochul. And, without Democrats joining with Republicans on things like what seems common sense to us, ending cashless bail, the idea of reducing the taxes and on the middle class and trying to reduce utility rates instead of putting in more regulations that we're going to pay more for natural gas. And people can't afford it. They go to the supermarkets every day. And that national poll I told you about, 43% of all Americans told us they were struggling to meet basic necessities. People in focus groups will tell you, sure, gas they're upset about, but they'll tell you they go to the supermarket, they're in shock, and they're trying to feed their families. And people say, I don't know whether to, pay gas, but I have to fill my tank to go to work or buy my kids food. And people that normal people that you normally interact with are telling us that for the first time ever, they had to go to a food bank because it's just so expensive. And, it's shocking.
I know. Jesse.
Yeah, John, I think that what's important is that everything you've touched upon that have led to this point. In your polling that you've seen either nationally, and we can drill down a little bit to the state of New York, because I think that's important, near and dear to the hearts of everyone who listens here and to Judge Weinberg. First, we know that there's some issues with waves and such, but where do you see the nation tilting this year? I mean, I know that some people have said that it's a 70% chance that the Democrats will retain the Senate, and we've discussed it on this show that Republicans may be blowing an opportunity to capture the House by even a larger plurality or a larger margin than had originally been projected. But what are you seeing in your polling throughout the country in terms of the mood of the electorate? That maybe almost despite the fact that that what the mainstream media doesn't want us to know is that there is a momentum, a stronger momentum out there, or maybe they're right. And the momentum is waning a bit. What are you saying?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you just said, everything you just said. And there'll be, in that generic doubt I talked about, 10% of the voters told us among these national likely voters, they told us 10%, so they were undecided on the choice for Congress. But when you look at the internals of who they are and what's going on, 78% of them told us they think the country's on the wrong track, and they're undecided for Congress. 69% told us they disapprove Biden, the job he's doing, and they're undecided for Congress. So it's right there for the Republicans to go get their votes. But you have to run a campaign. At this point, in 1994, when I was polling for the Contract for America with Chairman Haley Barbour and Newt Gingrich, we had a Contract for America that we were setting the agenda. We were going to stop Hillary care. We were going to do things that the voters agreed with us on. And we ended up winning a landslide and taking over 60 seats. In 2010, when I was working for Eric Cantor, who was the Republican whip at the time, we ran against Obamacare. We ran against higher taxes. We ran against what he was doing around the world with the military and security. And the Republicans won in a landslide. And so here you've got a situation where the votes are there, but set your agenda. Now, Kevin McCarthy is going to come out with a Commitment for America agenda this month. And they got to take it to the Democrats, because in those two elections, I told you, we were morphing Democrats' pictures into Bill Clinton in 1994 at this time across the country. We were Velcroing Barack Obama in 2010 to every one of the Democrats that we were running against in targeted races to take the House. The Republicans have to decide, do you want to win just 30 seats and take the House, or do you want to win 50 or 60 seats? Do you want to, win the Senate or not win the Senate? Because they've got races, great opportunities. Oz is coming back in Pennsylvania to hold the Republican seat. Johnson should win in Wisconsin, hold that seat. Bud should win in North Carolina, hold that seat. But now you got a situation where in New Hampshire, the Republicans haven't won the primary, but Senator Hassan is below 50%. You've got Herschel Walker, and some of the polls I trust is now ahead by a point or two in Georgia, and that's going to be close throughout. You've got Arizona, Blake Masters is still behind. Nevada, it looks like Adam Laxalt is ahead of the Democrat there. So we should take the Senate. Although Chuck Schumer, the guy's brilliant. I mean, he's been running negatives all summer on Republicans in these states. He's fighting. He loves being majority leader, and he's fighting to hold on to be majority leader. And we've got to take his candidates and point out they're voting 100% of the time with Joe Biden. They don't disagree on anything. They're for open borders. They're for stopping the wall. They're letting fentanyl come into this country. Therefore, the Biden gender equity plan has cashless bail. Cashless bail in New York State in crime is the number one issue among the majority voters by far, not just New York City. It's in the suburbs. It's upstate. And, they want to do for the country what they did to New York with cashless bail. I mean, we got to run on the issues, and we got to take it to them.
Well, let me ask you this question. And Jess and I were talking about in the first segment as well. I think, and I try to be as objective as I can on this. I don't have an agenda. I'm just other than to protect and defend this country. That's my agenda. I think this whole situation with the search warrant being executed against Trump's Mar-a-Lago property, with the document retention issue, which I believe is to be a civil issue, not a criminal issue, which is an authorized investigation of criminal nature by the President of the United States, who's against a future political opponent. You want to talk about taint of totalitarianism, authoritarianism, I think you have there. But I've often believed, though, that the big mistake, and this is my humble opinion, it's Trump's mistake, is if you were running a campaign in the midterms and you kept Trump back, you'll be doing far, far better than if Trump becomes front and center, because he then becomes the issue, and a lot of folks do not like Donald Trump, okay? And they hold their noses and they voted for Biden because they didn't like Trump a couple of years ago. And I think that's resurrected itself. And I think some of the people that Trump endorsed for Senate races or governorships were not nearly as strong as if he had stayed out of it, because they're wrapped around with Trump, and some of them are questionable. Okay. Now, on the other hand, I think a great threat to this country is the politicalization of the FBI, the weaponization of the FBI and the Justice Department. What's the impact on the politics of this country because of this, and the future of our country? What do you say on that, John?
I think it's very bad, because when you look at the January 6th committee, the fact that it's a partisan committee of Trump opponents, where you have just Democrats and you have two Republicans who are known to be anti-Trump, one, Liz Cheney, who just lost her election overwhelmingly in the Republican primary in Wyoming, which was an open primary that Democrats and independents could vote in, and which they did. And she got smashed with only 29% of the vote. That was like a referendum on that committee. And that committee, there's no Republican Trump supporters on that committee by design. That's the way Nancy Pelosi set it up. And the Republicans didn't fight hard enough. They didn't, but that undermined any legitimacy. And they're trying to create, an indictment to stop the president from running again, stop President Trump from running again.
Well, let's take a break. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. This is the Long Island Report with my co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged to have as our guest John McGlocklin, the leading pollster in the United States. John will be back with us in a moment when we go into our third segment of the Long Island Report.
Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile, with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and co-host, Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party and vice chair of the state Republican Party, and the leading pollster in American politics, John McGlocklin. John, I want to begin this segment by asking you the question about, the need for balanced government now more than ever, because I'm very afraid, and Jesse and I talk about this all the time, I'm very afraid of the danger of these supermajorities of these one-party states. What do you say?
By the way, first of all, you're putting a lot of pressure on me as the leading pollster in America, but the bar is low. So that's good. But but in the meantime, there's definitely, a need for more bipartisanship. And in New York State, we really need a check and balance in Albany, because I've had a theory that we're becoming like part of New England, where the legislatures go to such extremes where you have the state Senate Democrat majorities and the state Assembly supermajorities, where they passed cashless bail in a budget, and it got through, and we couldn't stop it. And they're doing things that, the idea of what they're doing with energy and, no natural gas hookups in New York City, that they're passing things that the average person doesn't know about. And because they've reduced the opposition to it doesn't matter. We got the governor, we got the supermajorities, we can pass it, and you're out of luck. And there's no debate over issues that are really hurting people. And it's really bad for New York. So the idea, like what Matt 2 years ago, when Jesse's organization upset Monica Martinez and they elected a new state senator, that's the path to this time. Besides electing Lee Zeldin, and by the way, if Lee Zeldin gets to be governor, I really look forward to, Jesse and yourself, Judge, doing bipartisan legislation, that they can pass or ideas that they can pass, because that's the only way we're going to succeed in New York. And based on my New England theory, when you look at New England with its Democrat dominance, there's a Republican governor in Vermont. There's a Republican governor in Massachusetts. There's a Republican governor in New Hampshire. And we came close 4 years ago with Bob Stefanowski by a couple points in Connecticut. This year he may win. He looks like, based on what Lamont is doing with the tax hands, he looks like he could win. So if we get Ed Lee Zeldin to that, we can stop these things and restore some sense of common sense sanity where Democrats and Republicans are working together to help people and reduce crime, reduce the cost of living. Congestion pricing, you've got to be kidding me what that's going to do to middle-class families. People that have to work in Manhattan, $23 to $34 a day a visit just for going below 61st Street, it's going to kill businesses in New York. So there's a real need for it in New York, absolutely. That's, November 8th.
Let me tell you the following. Jesse and I talked about it the first segment. I met this morning, John and I met with the Attorney General of Virginia, who was part of Governor Youngkin's team, as well as the lieutenant governor. And I think you must know about this, but it just makes my eyes bleed, my head explode. California passed a law about getting rid of all gas-driven cars by 2035, and you won't be able to buy them in California. But it's worse than that. It's because every step of the way between now and 2035, they're increasing the number of cars that have to be electric vehicles. Totally denying the fact that you don't have enough charging stations. Totally denying the fact that electric vehicles, to start the power stations in the cars, you need to have fuel oil. And you have these blackouts or potential blackouts in California where they won't even let you run your toaster anymore or your television because they don't have enough on the grid. And that's only with 2% of the cars out in California now. So my big concern is the Californization of America. And it doesn't have to be done by the federal government, because what some of these state legislatures, you correctly pointed out, John, and this is very important, California passed a law, and that then became the standard, and people in the legislature in Virginia and 17 other states said, whatever is good enough for California, we're going to do the same thing. So as a matter of Virginia law and these other states, whatever they do in California, we're going to adopt as a matter of our state law. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, California this weekend, as they passed that law, this weekend they're telling people, that the grid could fail, that they could have blackouts. And in 2003, almost 20 years ago, we did the recall election for Arnold. And the rolling blackouts were a big reason why they were able to recall Gray Davis and Arnold was elected governor back then. And it's gotten worse. And when you think about that, the electric cars, they're telling people you won't be able to charge. You got to use an electric car, but you won't be able to charge it. And the average person, the working class person, can't afford an electric car. And they can't afford to produce these without tax credits that subsidize it for wealthy people. So it's just, I wonder sometimes if this isn't a plot by China or some other country to bring us down, because they don't have the technology to make this a reality, and they're really hurting working middle-class people in New York.
Jesse.
And it's just across the country. So,
Jesse.
John, as you seem this, you made the case, and all these New England states have Republican governors and have legislatures that are run by Democrats, and it's been able to check their policies and stop these type of policies that we've seen going on right now here in New York. And everyone knows, I'm a big fan and advocate for Lee Zeldin and his run for being successful, and with him as running for Congress here for the last 4 terms. But the difference that the governor can make, especially in the state of New York, John, you just illustrated where we've seen where a Republican governor can make a clear difference for the people and the taxpayers and the middle class families of states up in New England. And here in New York, the governor has a set of powers and authorities that can help prevent and make the lives better, easier, and make change easier through the budget process. That's something we need to communicate to the voters, don't you think? That by electing more Republicans in both chambers and even if we don't have grab control of both chambers, by electing Lee Zeldin as governor, he can make immediate change through his executive orders and a budget that could end failed policies like cashless bail.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so critical. I mean, when you think about the attacks on Zeldin, he had to get through a primary that he won decisively, and going into this November election, Hochul's spending millions now attacking him with negatives, but still he keeps going up because the problems are so pressing for the majority of New Yorkers that Republicans and Democrats and independents are all joining together saying, we have to stop Albany from doing what they're doing. And we want our utility bills to go down, not up. We want our taxes to go down, not up. We want crime to go down, and we want to be safe again. So you've got such gravity from the ground up. And, it's in New York City. New York City, with this Democrat threshold, was at least picking up a lot of support, from Hispanics, Asians. I mean, people who want to be safe again. And people want to have a decent quality of life. They're coming to Lee, and it's the only way we're going to fix it is by voting, in November 8th, and it's going to be a bipartisan effort. So, well, you're dead on with that.
Yeah, I want to ask you this,
and that's one of the things they try to paint Lee as. I'm sorry, they try to paint Lee as being more of a partisan, but what we're seeing is that Lee's getting a lot of crossover and demonstrating what he is, bipartisan support. There's organizational Democratic clubs that are flipping their support from the Hochul to Lee because they live in the policies of cashless bail. They live in what the impacts of these policies are, and they see him as an agent of change to end these type of cashless bails and the high taxes and the high regulations.
Right. And what you see is they're trying to paint Lee as an extremist. Well, what's extreme about wanting lower taxes? That's mainstream. What's extreme about wanting to be safe with your family and be able to go out at night and go on trains and the subway and feel like you won't be attacked? That's mainstream. Plus, Lee's a veteran. He's a family man. You know him personally. His character is he's honest. I mean, this attack as extremists is kind of, just makes Hochul look so out of touch with the average family in New York. I mean, this is not who she was supposed to be when she ran for Congress years ago, when she was a pro-NRA congresswoman, when she became Cuomo's lieutenant governor. This is not who people thought she was, and she's turning out to be a radical.
Well, it's very troubling, I have to say. I want to get your final thoughts on this issue that troubles me deeply, which is the whole issue of border security and this whole fraud of the so-called sanctuary cities, which is an illegal act by the mayors who declare that their cities are sanctuary cities. What's your thought both on the politics and the future of America on that, John?
Well, in New York, politically, you're seeing this where we have to have a case there because they wanted them to vote, right? They wanted illegal immigrants to come to New York, and there's 800,000 illegal immigrants in New York City. They want to give them the right to vote in municipal elections for mayor and other offices. I mean, to me, that's just unconstitutional, let alone immoral and unethical, because, our citizenship and American citizenship has a value, and to do it for political reasons is just absolutely wrong. But there's really pragmatic reasons, because even though we're far removed from Texas and Arizona and California, I mean, JFK is the biggest recipient of immigrants, who come here legally and illegally, where sometimes they overstay their visas. But the Mexican border, last week in the New York Post, they showed how they're smuggling fentanyl from the border up through the heartland of America into New York City. And fentanyl is so lethal, and it's killing in the cities and suburbs. It's killing young people.
The number's 140,000. We've already had in the last year 140,000 fentanyl deaths. Well, this is the Long Island Report. We've had as our special guest John McGlocklin, leading pollster in the United States, even though he wants to deny it with modesty. And Jesse Garcia and I will be right back for the final segment. John, we want to thank you very, very much for being on. This has been very instructive, very informative, and it's good to have a good common sense discussion about important issues to New York City, New York State, Long Island, and in our country. Thank you very much. We deeply appreciate it. Jesse?
Thank you, John. We truly appreciate your insight in the coming elections, and maybe we can have you on, maybe a week out before the elections, just to give us a little bit of a snapshot.
That's a great idea. I think we should do that. John, would you do that for us?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Judge. For you, I do it, and we just got to make, sure we win this time because there's so much at stake. So, but it'd be refreshing if Lee Zeldin becomes governor. I know he's going to listen to you too about the issues and what needs to be done.
Well, thank you. All right, this is a Long Island Report. We'll be taking a break, and then we'll be coming back for our final segment of this week's program.
Talk Radio 77 WABC. It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
We're back. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg, along with the Republican Chair Jesse Garcia. Jesse and I just had the privilege and pleasure of having John McGlocklin on for the last two segments. John is a leading American pollster, and we had a very interesting conversation with him, Jesse. What do you think?
I think John provided some insight in some of the what I like to see, the behind-the-scenes type of information that is important as we run campaigns and lead candidates into the field of battle for the ballot box. But more importantly, what helps shape and what voters are truly thinking. And while the media is trying to tell us it's abortion, the media is trying to tell us it's guns, the media is trying to tell us it's everything's hunky dory and the economy is doing well. The reality is these polls and pollsters like John McGlocklin are able to give us an under the hood look at what the true voters are saying and feeling, and that all is not right. The country's going in the wrong direction, and that this community, whether it's the national level or here in the state of New York, voters are clamoring for a change. They've had enough of the status quo of the Democratic Party and their failed policies.
Well, and you have out on Long Island, Jesse, you have a housing crisis. The mortgage rates are going up. We have inflation. We may have what they call stagflation, which is less productivity and higher prices. People can't afford to buy housing. They can't afford to take care of their families. The prices of gas is subject to the changes of fortune based on what Russia is doing, or Saudis supplying us and not supplying us. We can have independence again if they would just open up the pipelines and let Canada and Alaska and New York and Pennsylvania and other places get the flow of gas going. We don't have to be dependent on foreign powers who are our enemies to get us gas. We were energy independent until Biden came in and shut everything down. And this war against energy is very, very dangerous, and it affects everyone because it's not just the price of housing and the price of staples, but it's the price of everything in the delivery chain, the manufacturing. It has to do with the production of food, not just what you're buying at the grocery stores, but how food is being produced, which to me is a segue into what I call, the China problem. I think this is a covert war by China against the United States. They've infiltrated our universities. They're buying off our intellectual, cultural, political, business elites by sweetheart deals, and they're buying up farmland. There are business deals that have to be investigated between the Biden family and China. Very important because China's been winning, as Kasmatidis says, and the American people have been losing. So we need to confront the fact that China has made a commitment to take out the United States and become the dominant world power. What do you say, Jesse?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that, as you said, there are a number of different, you said a boatload there, and I want to just unwrap that a little bit and actually add to it. Number one, you're talking about energy independence. You're right. It's by a stroke of a pen. We have spoken about this week after week after week. We could deal with the inflationary issues and the high cost of energy just by becoming energy independent again. But talking about China, and you're right, everything that has transpired over the last 2 years has benefited China. Now their economy is in turmoil. Their energy, their situations with lockdowns and such are problematic. We don't hear a lot about that because of their tight control over their information and their media. But we know that that's to be the case. The other thing is here, as you say, it's being a threat. They're the only ones that have been benefiting from conflicts across the world and crises across the world. Germany now has to restart their coal plants. We discussed this because they don't have the pipeline coming in through Ukraine and from Russia for their energy. They never should have shut them down to the point that they should be. They should have maintained themselves as energy independent. That should have been a lesson to us. But more importantly, when you have individuals like, if I could just want to point out to this, Matthias Döpfner, he's the head of Axel Springer, who owns the multimedia company. Politico is one of them. He came out just recently and said that all democracies should ban TikTok, and they should do that because all the personal information that we are putting on that platform, and President Trump was right, is being harvested by China. And that is creating a security issue, a national security issue, a privacy issue for individuals here in the United States. I mean, that is part of their platform to try and conduct this covert war you spoke about upon the United States. It's through energy. It's through partnerships with enemies of the United States and propping them up. It's them stealing proprietary information, and also in platforms like TikTok. And this is not me saying it. This is the head of a billion-dollar media corporation saying that platforms like TikTok are harvesting our personal information, our private information, using it for their benefit. And that's part of China's covert operations against the United States.
Well, and as you correctly point out, it's not just China acting alone. They're working in partnership with the Iranians. They're working in partnership with the Russians. They're working in partnership with the North Koreans. None of those countries mean us well. They would love to see the United States diminished or destroyed. And we need to wake up and face the China threat. Napoleon famously said, do not wake up China because it was a sleeping giant. And the fact of the matter is they take the long view. The problem with the Americans and the West is they take a short view. The long view, they have a plan to dominate the world. It's what the Greeks called hegemony. They want to dominate the world. They want to be the number one economic power in the world, the number one military power. Look how they constantly are threatening Taiwan. Look how they took over Hong Kong. Look how they're building these phony islands with landfill to try to control the sea lanes. I mean, this is a very dangerous country, China. They have this policy, this long-range policy. It's based on Sun Tzu, who was a great genius of Chinese history, military genius. And he said the best way to take out a country is you undermine them from within. And that's exactly what's going on. I want to ask you just a question about the Ukrainian war. What do you think about that?
I think that you see Russia now getting armaments and buying armaments and missiles from their new partners in North Korea. I think that the Ukrainians, because of their own actions and finally the support of the international community in the United States, which was far too slow, is taking the fight now to Russian forces. The Russian forces are demoralized, and I believe Putin's war is now going to become a problem for him at home. We still need to do more. It was good to see that, Secretary Bilkin, made a surprise visit to the Ukraine and pledged another $2 billion of support. But again, I think this is the United States, and this is under the leadership of the Democratic Party since 2021. The United States has been playing catch up on every facet of on a geopolitical spectrum, whether it be energy, diplomacy, security, economically. We are playing catch up and allowing bad actors and our enemies to set the agenda and set the tone of the fight. It's time that we, as Americans, come together to set the tone. We need to demonstrate leadership, and we haven't been doing that.
Well, I think that's exactly right, Jesse, and which leads me to my final point. What do you think about this Iran deal that the Biden administration was a failed policy, the Obama administration, and the Biden deal will be even worse? What do you say about that?
We've discussed this. It's wrong-headed. It's wrong from a security point of view. It's wrong economically. It's wrong for the region. We're empowering the single largest, most active sponsor of terrorism on the globe. It's wrong, and I'm not sure who the president is trying to appease here. I don't see the end game there, and I think that's the problem. We don't see an end game here. We've seen that the dictators and regimes like Iran are going to respond to strength and purpose and resolve, not appeasement. And this is nothing more than funneling more and more money to this sponsor of state sponsor of terrorism. It's a mistake. It's wrongheaded.
And one more thing before we sign off, Jesse. You had some breaking news for us about the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth.
Sure. Just earlier this week, the Queen of England passed away after 70 years of service. She just celebrated her 70 years of service. She, under her leadership and monarchy, the United Kingdom has been one of the greatest partners and friends of the United States. A loss broadcast on her 21st birthday, when she stated that she declared before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. And she certainly, at age 21, she certainly was very prophetic, because she was in the service of the people of the United Kingdom and the people of the world.
Well, our thoughts and prayers are with the great Queen and the people of England, our great partners. This has been the Long Island Report with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We wish you and your family good health and well-being, and we'll be talking to you again next week. Thank you very much for listening.